Hey everyone, so today we're going to look at ADHD from a completely different angle. We're going to move past just calling it a disorder and explore this really cool idea. What if the ADHD brain isn't broken at all? What if it's actually a brain that was perfectly built for a world that's long gone?
Wow. For someone so smart, you can be so stupid. Has anyone ever said something like that to you? Or maybe you've even thought it about yourself. It just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? And according to cognitive psychologist Salif Mohammadeh, that one sentence perfectly sums up the frustrating paradox of living with ADHD. That's what we're going to dig into today. This clash between feeling like you have so much potential, but then dealing with this, baffling inconsistency.
All right, first things first, let's talk about what it's actually like to have ADHD in the world we live in right now. Because the challenges they are very, very real. Especially when you're in a society that's basically built around schedules, deadlines, and this constant ticking clock.
I love this analogy from Dr. Edward Hallowell. He says it's like having a Ferrari for a brain, but with bicycle brakes. Just think about that. Your mind is revving, it's full of ideas, it can go 1,000,000 miles an hour, but the system to slow it down or stop it, it's just completely unreliable. And we're not just talking about missing an appointment. We're talking about the brakes failing on your emotions, leading to these outbursts of frustration or anger that just feel like they come out of nowhere.
So, a huge piece of this puzzle is something Dr. Russell Barkley calls time blindness. And this is a really important distinction. It doesn't mean you can't read a clock. It's about not being able to use your sense of time to, guide your actions for the future. It's about regulating your own behavior based on time, which is a whole different ballgame.
Okay, look at it this way. For a typical brain, the future is kind of like a clear timeline. You can see it, you can plan for it, but for the ADHD brain, the future is often just a blur. There's now, and then there's not now. That's it. Dr. Barkley gives this perfect example, a book report due in 3 weeks. For most people, that's a real thing you can plan for. But for the ADHD brain, 3 weeks from now might as well be never. It doesn't feel real until the night before it's due, and then it's panic mode. It makes planning and executing over a long period almost impossible without a ton of outside help.
But what if this isn't a bug? What if it's a feature? What if we've been looking at this whole thing completely backwards? This is where we get to a really radical and honestly empowering way to think about this. It makes you question the whole idea that these traits are, at their core, a disorder.
And this is the big question from Salif Mohammadeh. Was it always a disorder? I mean, could it be that the ADHD brain isn't broken at all, but is actually a super specialized tool, one that was perfectly designed for a totally different environment, like the world our ancient ancestors inhabited?
Okay, so to get this, you need to know about two kinds of attention. First, there's voluntary attention. That's the one you have to force yourself to use to get through, say, a really boring spreadsheet. It takes a ton of energy. Then there's involuntary attention. That's the automatic stuff. Your head snaps around when you see a flash of movement or hear a loud noise. Now here's the kicker. The ADHD brain is basically supercharged for that second one, for involuntary attention. That might be a huge pain when you're trying to do your taxes, right? But imagine you're a hunter-gatherer, being able to instantly spot a predator hiding in the bushes, or notice a tiny stream off in the distance. Suddenly, it's not a liability, it's a massive advantage.
And get this, there's some really fascinating science that seems to support this idea. There was this study on a nomadic group in Kenya. They found that the men who had a gene variant linked to ADHD were actually better nourished than the guys who didn't have it. Why? Because their restlessness, their curiosity, it made them better hunters and foragers. But here's the mind-blowing part. In a related group that had settled down to become farmers, the men with that exact same gene were undernourished. The same trait that was a huge advantage in one context became a disadvantage in another. It's all about the environment.
Which, brings us to this brilliant reframing from Salif Mohammadeh. Could we at least start going by potential hunting and gathering badasses instead? It's funny, but it's also got a really powerful point. This isn't about making excuses for anything. It's about seeing that maybe these traits are leftovers from an incredibly useful survival skill. It's the classic fish out of water story.
All right, so let's really get into this. Because if this hunter brain idea is true, then these traits can't just be about weaknesses, right? They've got to show up as some pretty unique strengths, even here in our modern farmer's world.
And man, these strengths are for real. That brain that never shuts up, that's an incredible brainstorming machine. Easily distracted? Well, that can also mean you're more resilient, because you move on from setbacks fast. Constantly living in a bit of chaos? You become a master of adapting on the fly.
And that inability to fake interest, it means when you're passionate about something, it is 100% real. And then, of course, there's the big one, hyperfocus. That ability to get so deep into something you love that the rest of the world just disappears. When you can aim it right, that's a legit superpower.
But, and this is super important, we have to be really clear here. Just because we can reframe these traits as strengths doesn't mean the pain goes away. The friction of being a hunter in a farmer's world is real. It's not just annoying, it causes deep, profound psychological and even biological pain.
So take a look at this number, 15%. According to Stanford's Dr. Robert Sapolsky, that's how many people in the general population will have a major depressive episode. And he's really clear, we're not talking about just being sad for a long time. This is a real biological disorder. The constant grinding stress of trying to fit into a world that isn't built for you puts people with ADHD at a way higher risk for these kinds of co-occurring conditions.
And so often that struggle turns inward. It becomes a voice inside your own head. Salif Mohammed points out that even little kids with ADHD can start to hate themselves, developing this super harsh inner critic. And that brings us to this question from Dr. Julie Smith. Just let this sink in. If you spoke to your friends the way you speak to yourself, would they hang around? For so many people, the answer is just a flat no. That inner voice just becomes this non-stop loop of criticism for not being able to meet standards your brain was never designed to meet in the first place.
This right here is why getting a diagnosis can be absolutely life-changing. It's just like Trevor Noah said, just knowing is like 80% of the battle. Because in that moment, you finally understand you're not crazy, you're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're not broken. You finally have a name for it, an explanation. And once you have that, you can finally start to figure out a path forward.
So where does that leave us? Well, if ADHD really is this fish out of water situation, then the answer isn't to try and teach the fish how to walk on land, right? The answer is to build a better aquarium for it. The focus has to shift from trying to fix the person to changing the environment to fit the person.
And Dr. Barkley has some really practical ways to do this. Your internal clock is fuzzy? Okay, so you put clocks everywhere. You externalize time with timers, big calendars, alarms on your phone. That giant project that feels impossible, you shrink it. You break it down into tiny, manageable chunks you can do each day. Feeling unaccountable? You build in accountability. You work with a team. You have a check-in buddy. It's all about taking the stuff your brain struggles with internally and building a support system for it in the outside world.
And that really leaves us with this final question to chew on. How do we help the fish thrive even when it's out of water? You know, when you start seeing ADHD as a mismatch instead of a deficit, it kind of changes the whole conversation. It means we need less judgment and a whole lot more creativity. It means we need more compassion for others and maybe most importantly for ourselves. The goal isn't just about managing a disorder anymore. It's about how we can start to redesign our world, our jobs, our schools, our own lives, so that all kinds of brains, these hunter brains included, don't just get by, but can actually truly thrive. Thanks for digging into this with me.